In the shadows of American cities and rural communities alike, an invisible network thrives, one that operates by its own codes, outside the boundaries of law and order. Today, over 33,000 active gangs operate across the United States, weaving a complex web of violence, trafficking, and organized crime that touches virtually every corner of American society. The story of America's most dangerous gangs isn't simply one of violence and criminal activity. It's a reflection of our nation's deepest social fractures, economic disparities, and cultural divisions. These organizations have evolved from simple street crews into sophisticated criminal enterprises, adapting to law enforcement pressure and expanding their reach across state lines and international borders. Behind the sensationalized headlines and pop culture portrayals lies a sobering reality. Gang violence claims thousands of American lives each year, devastates communities, and exacts an extraordinary toll on our economy, healthcare system, and collective sense of security. To understand America's gang problem is to understand a significant piece of our national identity, both its darkest corners and the societal conditions that allow such organizations to flourish. As we explore the landscape of the most dangerous gangs currently operating in America, we'll examine their origins, evolution, and current activities, revealing not just who they are, but why they exist, and how they continue to adapt and survive despite decades of law enforcement efforts to dismantle them. The definition of a gang itself can be surprisingly complex. While popular imagination might conjure images of color-coded bandanas and territorial graffiti, the reality encompasses a far broader spectrum of organizations. Law enforcement typically categorizes gangs into several distinct types, each with their own structures and operational models. Street gangs represent perhaps the most visible form, organizing around neighborhoods or territories, and often engaging in localized drug distribution, robbery, and violent turf wars. Prison gangs, meanwhile, originate within correctional facilities, but frequently extend their influence beyond prison walls, orchestrating sophisticated criminal operations from behind bars. Motorcycle gangs, or outlaw motorcycle clubs, maintain their own unique hierarchies and codes of conduct, blending legitimate activities with criminal enterprises. Then there are international gangs that operate across borders, trafficking in drugs, weapons, and human beings on a global scale. The history of American gangs traces back further than many realize. While gang activity is often viewed as a modern urban phenomenon, organized criminal groups have existed in America since the post-Revolutionary War period. The early 19th century saw the rise of gangs like the 40 Thieves and Dead Rabbits in New York City's Five Points District, groups immortalized in Martin Scorsese's Gangs of New York. These early gangs often formed along ethnic lines, providing protection and economic opportunity for immigrant communities facing discrimination and poverty. The mid-20th century witnessed the emergence of many of today's most notorious gangs, particularly in cities like Chicago and Los Angeles, where economic disinvestment, racial segregation, and social isolation created fertile ground for gang formation. What began as neighborhood protection groups often evolved into criminal organizations as legitimate economic opportunities disappeared from urban centers. Today's gang landscape presents a staggering statistical reality. Approximately 1.4 million Americans hold formal membership in gangs, a number that exceeds the active duty personnel in the entire U.S. military. This figure includes both incarcerated members and those operating on the streets, with many more individuals affiliated with gangs without formal membership. Gang membership crosses all demographic boundaries, though it remains particularly concentrated in economically disadvantaged communities where legitimate opportunities for advancement are scarce. The economic toll of gang activity defies easy calculation, but conservative estimates place it at approximately $33 billion annually. This includes direct costs of criminal activity, theft, fraud, drug trafficking, as well as the enormous expenses associated with law enforcement, prosecution, and incarceration. Healthcare costs alone attributed to gang-related violence approach $11 billion yearly, with gunshot wounds and other violent injuries overwhelming emergency departments in affected areas. Beyond these quantifiable costs lies an immeasurable human toll. communities living in fear, businesses relocating, property values plummeting, and countless young lives diverted from education and legitimate employment into cycles of violence and incarceration. The ripple effects extend far beyond the immediate victims of gang violence, shaping entire neighborhoods and generations. Among the most feared and widely recognized gangs operating in America today is MS-13, or Mara Salvatrucha. What distinguishes MS-13 from many other American gangs is its international origin and reach. The gang emerged in the 1980s among Salvadoran immigrants in Los Angeles, many of whom had fled civil war in their home country. These immigrants, often traumatized by violence and facing hostility in their new country, formed MS-13 initially as a means of self-protection against established Mexican and African American gangs. When members were later deported back to El Salvador, they established cliques there, and the gang rapidly expanded throughout Central America. Today, MS-13 operates as a transnational organization with an estimated 10,000 members in the United States spread across at least 40 states, and tens of thousands more throughout Central America. The gang has earned its reputation through extreme violence and a wide range of criminal activities. MS-13's operations include drug trafficking, human smuggling, sex trafficking, extortion, and murder for hire. The gang is notorious for its brutal enforcement methods, including dismemberment with machetes, a signature weapon that reflects the gang's Central American roots. This brutality isn't random, but serves a strategic purpose, establishing a reputation so terrifying that victims and witnesses remain silent out of fear. Recent law enforcement efforts have targeted MS-13 leadership with some success. In a significant development, Henry Josue Villatoro Santos, a top MS-13 leader, was arrested in Virginia in early 2024. Operating under the street name Slow, Santos allegedly controlled multiple cliques across the eastern United States and coordinated with MS-13 leadership in El Salvador. This arrest represented a major blow to the gang's command structure, though history suggests MS-13's decentralized nature allows it to adapt quickly to leadership losses. Often overshadowed by the more infamous MS-13, but no less dangerous, is the 18th Street Gang, also known as Barrio 18 or Calle 18. Like MS-13, the 18th Street Gang originated in Los Angeles, but decades earlier in the 1960s. What began as a small street gang in the Rampart area of Los Angeles has evolved into one of the largest transnational criminal organizations in the Western Hemisphere. Unlike many gangs that restrict membership based on ethnic or racial lines, the 18th Street Gang has historically welcomed members from diverse backgrounds, contributing to its rapid growth and expansion. This inclusive recruitment strategy has made it one of the fastest-growing gangs in the United States, with an estimated 30,000 to 50,000 members nationwide and tens of thousands more across Mexico and Central America. The 18th Street Gang's criminal portfolio is diverse and sophisticated. Members engage in extortion of local businesses, drug distribution at all levels, robbery, human trafficking, and murder. The gang has also demonstrated a willingness to collaborate with larger criminal organizations, including Mexican drug cartels, serving as distributors and enforcers within the United States. Perhaps the most iconic gang rivalry in American history is that between the Crips and Bloods. These predominantly African-American gangs emerged in Los Angeles in the late 1960s and early 1970s during a period of intense racial tension, police brutality, and economic abandonment of inner-city neighborhoods. The Crips formed first, founded by 15-year-old Raymond Washington in 1969. The organization began with neighborhood youth looking for protection and identity amid the dissolution of earlier black political organizations like the Black Panthers. The Bloods formed shortly after as a response to Crip expansion and aggression, with several smaller gangs banding together for protection against Crip attacks. What began as a localized conflict in South Central Los Angeles has since spread nationwide, with Crip and Blood sets operating in virtually every state. While often portrayed as monolithic organizations, both gangs are actually loose confederations of sets or cliques that maintain varying degrees of connection to the original Los Angeles groups. Some operate as franchises using the brand name, but with limited coordination, while others maintain stronger ties to their California counterparts. The criminal activities of these gangs center primarily around drug trafficking, particularly crack cocaine distribution beginning in the 1980s, which fueled their expansion across the country. Both gangs remain active in numerous criminal enterprises, including robbery, extortion, and human trafficking. Their territorial disputes have led to decades of cyclical violence that has claimed thousands of lives and devastated countless urban communities. Moving from the streets to the prison system brings us to one of America's most fearsome organizations, the Aryan Brotherhood. Founded in 1964 at San Quentin State Prison in California, the Aryan Brotherhood began as a protective group for white inmates in the racially charged prison environment, but quickly evolved into a sophisticated criminal enterprise. Despite having a relatively small membership compared to street gangs, estimates place formal membership at under 2,000 individuals. The Aryan Brotherhood wields extraordinary influence within the prison system and beyond. The group operates with a paramilitary structure featuring a formal hierarchy and strict codes of conduct. Its members are bound by an oath of blood in, blood out. Joining requires committing violence, often murder, and leaving is punishable by death. The Aryan Brotherhood's activities extend far beyond simple protection of white inmates. Within prisons, the organization controls drug trafficking, gambling, and extortion rackets. Outside prison walls, members and associates engage in methamphetamine production and distribution, armed robbery, murder for hire, and weapons trafficking. The gang maintains connections with other white supremacist organizations and motorcycle gangs, creating a network that spans both criminal and extremist worlds. One of the more recent additions to America's landscape of dangerous organizations is the Proud Boys, a far-right group that blurs the line between political organization and criminal gang. Founded in 2016 by Vice Media co-founder Gavin McInnes, the Proud Boys describe themselves as Western chauvinists who refuse to apologize for creating the modern world. While the Proud Boys reject the label of white supremacists, their activities and rhetoric have routinely aligned with extremist ideologies. The organization has been involved in numerous violent confrontations at political rallies and demonstrations across the country, often appearing heavily armed and wearing their signature black and yellow Fred Perry polo shirts. The group gained particular notoriety for their involvement in the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot, where members played a significant role in breaching police lines and entering the Capitol building. Following these events, several Proud Boys leaders, including former National Chairman Enrique Tarrio, were convicted of seditious conspiracy and other serious charges. Unlike traditional street gangs, the Proud Boys operate with a formal initiation process and organizational structure that includes local chapters nationwide. Their criminal activities primarily involve politically motivated violence, though individual members have been linked to more conventional crimes, including assault, weapons violations, and hate crimes. Each of these organizations represents a distinct threat to American communities, whether through direct violence, drug trafficking, or political extremism. Together, they illustrate the diverse and evolving nature of gang activity in the United States, demanding equally sophisticated and adaptable responses from law enforcement and society as a whole. The geographic footprint of America's most dangerous gangs extends far beyond their points of origin, creating a complex national landscape of territorial control, criminal influence, and violence. While popular imagination often places gang activity exclusively in inner-city neighborhoods, the reality reveals a much more pervasive presence touching virtually every type of American community. Los Angeles remains the epicenter of gang activity in the United States, with over 450 active gangs comprising approximately 45,000 members. The city's gang culture dates back generations, with neighborhoods like Compton, Watts, and East LA becoming synonymous with gang territories. The influence of LA gangs extends well beyond local neighborhoods. The city serves as the birthplace and spiritual home for national organizations, including the Crips, Bloods, 18th Street Gang, and MS-13. Chicago presents perhaps the most fragmented gang landscape in America, with over 100,000 active gang members divided among dozens of organizations. Unlike Los Angeles, where a few major gangs dominate large territories. Chicago's gang map resembles a complex mosaic of small, hyperlocal sets controlling individual blocks or housing projects. This fragmentation has contributed to the city's persistently high homicide rates, as conflicts erupt not just between rival gangs, but between factions of the same organization. The Gangster Disciples, Black Disciples, Latin Kings, and Vice Lords maintain the largest presence in Chicago, though their internal cohesion has deteriorated in recent years. This splintering has led to unpredictable violence, as young members operate with increasing autonomy and decreasing discipline, often igniting conflicts over personal vendettas rather than organizational objectives. New York City presents a different model. Once dominated by the infamous gangs of the 1970s and 80s, including the Savage Skulls, Black Spades, and Ghetto Brothers, the city's gang landscape transformed dramatically following aggressive policing strategies in the 1990s. Today, New York's gang presence is more subtle but remains potent, with Dominican gangs like Trinitarios, Jamaican posses, and sets of national organizations like MS-13 and Bloods maintaining influence in specific neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs. The U.S.-Mexico border region represents a distinct and particularly volatile zone of gang activity, where domestic gang operations intersect with international drug cartels and human trafficking networks. This 1,954-mile boundary has become a critical operational area for gangs like MS-13, Barrio Azteca, and the Texas Syndicate, who leverage their cross-border connections to facilitate drug trafficking, human smuggling, and weapons movement. In border states like Texas, Arizona, and California, these gangs often serve as the American distribution arm for Mexican cartels, particularly the Sinaloa Cartel and Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Local gangs provide the street-level distribution networks, enforcement, and territorial control that international organizations require to operate effectively within the United States. The border dynamic creates unique security challenges as gang members move between countries to evade law enforcement. MS-13, in particular, has exploited this mobility, with members fleeing to El Salvador or Honduras when facing heat from American authorities, only to return when conditions permit. This international fluidity makes border region gangs particularly difficult to dismantle through conventional law enforcement approaches. Perhaps the most significant shift in America's gang landscape over the past 2 decades has been the expansion into suburban and rural communities. Areas once considered immune to gang influence now grapple with growing gang presence, as organizations adapt their operations to exploit new territories and markets. This expansion has been driven by several factors. Housing policy changes and gentrification in urban centers have displaced gang-affiliated residents to suburban areas, bringing their connections and conflicts with them. Simultaneously, the opioid epidemic created unprecedented demand for narcotics in rural and suburban communities, presenting lucrative opportunities for gangs to expand their distribution networks. Rural gang activity looks different from its urban counterpart. Rather than controlling defined territories through visible street presence, rural gang members often operate more covertly, focusing on drug distribution and production, particularly methamphetamine manufacturing in isolated areas. The Aryan Brotherhood and Outlaws Motorcycle Club have established significant presence in rural America, exploiting reduced law enforcement capacity and leveraging existing methamphetamine markets. Suburban gang presence has grown particularly in working-class and lower-income suburban communities experiencing economic decline. Gang recruitment in these areas often targets middle and high school students, creating a pipeline that pulls youth into established urban organizations or spawns local cliques that adopt the names and symbols of national gangs without formal affiliation. The federal response to America's gang crisis has evolved significantly over recent decades, shifting from primarily reactive approaches to more strategic and coordinated efforts. The FBI's Safe Streets Violent Crime Initiative stands as the cornerstone of federal anti-gang operations, with 160 violent gang safe streets task forces nationwide combining federal resources with state and local expertise. These task forces leverage the powerful tools available under federal law, including RICO, Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, prosecutions, which allow authorities to target entire criminal organizations rather than just individual members. This approach has proven particularly effective against hierarchical organizations like MS-13 and the Aryan Brotherhood, where removing leadership can destabilize entire networks. The Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, attacks gang operations through their narcotic supply chains, targeting the international connections that fuel gang economies. Meanwhile, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, ATF, focuses on disrupting the flow of illegal weapons to gang members, who are statistically far more likely to commit gun violence than non-gang affiliated individuals. In a controversial move reflecting the evolving understanding of transnational gangs, the Trump administration in 2018 formally classified MS-13 as a transnational criminal organization, TCO. This designation stopped short of labeling the gang a foreign terrorist organization, but expanded authorities for tracking financial transactions and enhanced penalties for supporting the group's activities. State and local authorities remain on the front lines of anti-gang operations, developing innovative approaches tailored to their specific regional challenges. Chicago's gang violence reduction strategy employs focused deterrence, identifying the most violence-prone individuals in each district and offering them a choice: accept social services and exit gang life, or face enhanced prosecution for any future criminal activity. Los Angeles has pioneered the Comprehensive Gang Reduction and Youth Development GRYD program, which combines targeted law enforcement with prevention services in the city's most gang-impacted zones. The program includes intervention workers, often former gang members themselves, who mediate conflicts and prevent retaliatory violence following shootings. Many jurisdictions have adopted gang injunctions, civil court orders that restrict the activities of known gang members in specified areas. These controversial measures prohibit identified gang members from associating with each other, wearing gang colors, or displaying gang signs within designated safety zones. While credited with reducing visible gang activity in some neighborhoods, critics argue these injunctions disproportionately impact communities of color and raise significant civil liberties concerns. Indeed, anti-gang efforts exist in a perpetual tension between security imperatives and civil rights considerations. Critics contend that gang databases, which track suspected gang affiliates, often contain inaccurate information and rely on overly broad criteria that can label individuals as gang members based on their neighborhoods, associations, or appearance rather than criminal activity. Racial disparities permeate the enforcement landscape, with Black and Hispanic men disproportionately targeted in gang operations, even when controlling for crime rates and gang involvement. These concerns have prompted reforms in several jurisdictions, including California's Fair and Accurate Gang Database Act, which established new standards for inclusion in gang databases and created pathways for individuals to challenge their designation as gang members. The impact of gang activity extends far beyond direct violence, reshaping the social and economic fabric of affected communities. Neighborhoods with high gang presence typically experience declining property values, business closures, and residential flight, as those with means relocate to safer areas. This economic drain exacerbates the very conditions of poverty and limited opportunity that fuel gang recruitment in the first place. Schools in gang-impacted areas face particular challenges, as rivalries and recruitment pressures follow students into educational environments. Gang presence contributes to higher dropout rates and lower academic achievement, with teachers and administrators forced to balance educational objectives with security concerns. Children as young as elementary school age report adjusting their routes to school, clothing choices, and even their friendships to navigate gang territory safely. The public health impact extends beyond the direct victims of violence. Residents in high gang areas report elevated rates of anxiety, depression, and post-traumatic stress similar to those found in war zones. Children exposed to chronic gang violence show developmental delays, behavioral problems, and cognitive impairments that can persist into adulthood. Across America, communities have developed grassroots responses to these challenges, often led by those with personal experience of gang impact. In Los Angeles, Homeboy Industries has become the world's largest gang intervention and rehabilitation program, providing employment training, mental health services, and tattoo removal to former gang members seeking to exit the life. Founded by Father Gregory Boyle in 1988, the organization employs former gang members from rival organizations side by side, breaking down entrenched animosities through shared work and purpose. Chicago's Cure Violence, formerly Ceasefire, approaches gang violence as a public health crisis rather than merely a criminal justice issue. The program employs violence interrupters, often former gang members with credibility in their communities, who detect and mediate conflicts before they escalate to violence. In areas where the program operates at full capacity, shootings have decreased by up to 70%. Prevention efforts increasingly focus on the critical middle school years, when gang recruitment typically begins. Programs like GREAT, Gang Resistance Education and Training, bring law enforcement officers into classrooms to build relationships with students and provide education about the realities of gang involvement. Meanwhile, organizations like Boys and Girls Clubs offer positive alternatives during the high-risk after-school hours, providing mentorship, academic support, and recreational opportunities in safe environments. The human dimension of America's gang crisis emerges most powerfully through individual stories of those directly impacted. Former MS-13 member Juan Martinez, named Change for Protection, describes his recruitment at age 12 in suburban Maryland. They become your family when you don't have one. I was alone, mom working 3 jobs, dad deported. They were there every day, offering protection, money, respect. By the time I realized what I joined, getting out seemed impossible. After serving 8 years for armed robbery, Juan now works with a faith-based intervention program, using his experience to steer young people away from the path he took. The hardest part is showing kids that the protection gangs offer is an illusion. They're not protecting you. They're using you as a shield, as a weapon, as a sacrifice when necessary. Community leader Maria Gonzalez has watched her South Chicago neighborhood transform over 3 decades of gang activity. When the factories closed in the 80s, the gangs moved in. They offered what the community had lost: jobs, structure, identity. Wrong as it was, they filled the vacuum when legitimate institutions abandoned us. Her community organization now works to reclaim that space through economic development, youth programming, and strengthened social connections among residents. The persistence of America's most dangerous gangs, despite decades of law enforcement pressure, underscores the complex, multifaceted nature of the challenge. These organizations have demonstrated remarkable adaptability, evolving their structures, activities, and territories in response to changing conditions. Their continued presence reflects not just criminal enterprise, but deeper social fractures, economic inequality, racial segregation, educational disparities, and the human need for identity, protection, and belonging when legitimate avenues to these essentials are blocked. Addressing America's gang crisis requires approaches that match this complexity, combining targeted enforcement with prevention, intervention, and community empowerment. As former gang leader-turned-activist Antong Lucky observes, you can't arrest your way out of this problem. For every gang member locked up, 3 more are being created by the same conditions that created the first one. Dive deeper into the hidden world of America's most dangerous criminal organizations by subscribing to Inside the Secret World of Mafia Titans on YouTube. Our documentary series takes you beyond headlines and Hollywood portrayals to reveal the true stories of America's most notorious criminal organizations. From MS-13's brutal rise to the inner workings of prison gangs, our channel delivers the unfiltered reality of gang life in America. Subscribe now and join our community of over 500,000 viewers committed to understanding and ultimately solving one of America's most persistent challenges.